Never in all of my life did a phenomenon sweep all before it and cow and terrorize the big civil institutions of the land, be embraced by all of the mainstream political parties like the Transmania, which was slaughtered today on the altar of the Supreme Court in London, where the learned justices unanimously defined that a woman is an adult human female. It seems ridiculous even to have to state this, but anyone who's lived through the last decade or so realizes what a nightmare this has been. Realizes that little girls going in for boxing are likely to get their lights punched out by a man pretending to be a little girl. That little girl swimmers are likely to be left trailing in the wake of men pretending to be little girl swimmers. That runners, that jumpers, that wrestlers, that all kinds of athletes would not only be forced to share their dressing room with someone with a big swinging dick, but are likely to be overwhelmed by the superior physical strength implicit in being born a male. Now, you may think from the foregoing that I give a toss what people live like, who they love, how they dress, and what they do, but you'd be mistaken. I'm a good time kind of guy. I treat everybody exactly as they want to be treated, and I have always done so. But facts are chiels that win a ding, as we say in Scotland. Facts are facts. They cannot be changed by whimsy. They cannot be changed by a wave of political correctness even. They cannot be changed by making it illegal to state the facts. They cannot... You think I'm joking about that? My monologue so far would, before today's ruling by the High Court, have left me open to prosecution. I mean it. Criminal prosecution for saying what I have just said, even though I'm saying it in my own home. And I'm not making that up either. The reality is that the political class in Britain, and I presume in other Western countries, went overboard hook, line and sinker. They swallowed whole the nostrum that someone can be a woman merely by declaring themselves to be so. And this led to all kinds of complications, all kinds of crimes, all kinds of loss of rights for actual women. For example, tomorrow the so-called Scottish government is going to have to empty a very large number of male prisoners from the female prison estate. It became quite a racket, you know, with all kinds of unexpected side benefits for prisoners to, whilst on remand or even whilst already sentenced and in prison, to identify as females and have to be moved to a female prison. Well, they subsequently had sex with the female prisoners, subsequently had sex with the female prison staff, and quite often against the will of both. Rape after rape, sexual assault after sexual assault took place on the Scottish prison estate because it was a heresy to question whether that hairy arse stabber and robber that went into prison as a man could now be denied the pleasures of redefining themselves as a woman. None of this is made up, dear viewers from other parts of the world. All of this happened and would have gone on happening until today's ruling of the Supreme Court, which bowls all of these would-be maidens over. It kills forever the idea that someone becomes a woman merely by declaration, and that other women have got to accommodate to their declaration. That institutions no longer have the need to provide single-sex spaces, single-sex wards, single-sex changing rooms, single-sex toilets. All of that will now have to change. The politicians, and I mean all of them, Labour, Liberal, Nationalist, especially Nationalist, work that one out because I cannot, Greens, and even the Conservative Party. All of them bought into this mania. All of them, to a greater or lesser extent, bent the institutions of our land and even the very pronouns of life to what has turned out to have been a here today, gone tomorrow piece of wokery, greenery and quackery, and it's all now gone. Some are lamenting it. I notice Sky News can hardly stop itself from weeping. Whatever happened to Sky News? It used to be owned by Murdoch, for God's sake. Now its presenters are almost in tears on behalf of what they say is the oppressed trans minority that have been dealt a terrible blow by the 3 Supreme Court justices today. But the truth is that all kinds of things will now have to change. People who are in prison, pretending to be women but not, will have to be moved. People who have been sent to prison for breaking the laws on hurting the feelings of those who merely claim to be women but it turns out were not, will have to be freed. Compensation will have to be paid. People will have to get their jobs back for refusing to twist the very meanings of the English language and the very meaning of biological science. So I think it's a great day. It's a great day, and it's a great pity that it had to be delivered by 3 bewigged Supreme Court justices rather than the common sense of a political class listening to the common sense of the British people. And I think, in a way, that's the most important thing. If you had asked the British people at any time whether they wanted to go down the road to Transmania, they would overwhelmingly have said not. Even though great big guns of censorship and algorithmic suppression and just general bad order thrown upon those who took a different view. The vast majority of people were never for this. It was a tiny political class across the political board that led us down this crazed, unhinged road. And in a sane world, in a just world, all of these political leaders, all of these trade union leaders, all of this BTUC, STUC, WTUC, all of them who bought into this crazed nonsense would be considering their positions, would be making way for someone more in tune with the popular mind. But we all know that ain't going to happen. So I take my hat off to the Supreme Court justices who delivered sanity in their verdict today, and I look forward to the resignation of the political leaders, particularly in my own country of Scotland, that have made life actual hell for anyone who stood up against them, and particularly for women's organizations that stood up against them. Those women who wouldn't wished, those women who would not stay quiet. And J.K. Rowling, with whom I disagree on virtually everything else, was virtually driven out of Scotland for her insistence on that which was decided by the Supreme Court today to be simple common sense. But there's so much else I need to talk about. I'd better get on. 245% is the latest tariff that the United States has imposed on the People's Republic of China. In retaliation, China has shown great ingenuity and the value of TikTok. No wonder they tried to get TikTok out of Chinese hands. I'm watching all day now have you seen the J.D. Vance? Turns out J.D. Vance wears eye makeup. I must say I never noticed that before, and I have no real animus against it. As a matter of fact, I quite like and admire him. But when he called the Chinese people peasants in a derogatory way, he certainly could not have been expecting the fusillade of retaliation that he is still suffering. By the way, there's nothing wrong with being a peasant, but J.D. Vance, himself a hillbilly, nothing wrong with being a hillbilly either. But J.D. Vance ought to have known that to use the word peasants in that drip of condescension that he did was effectively saying that the Chinese people were somehow backward, somehow lesser beings. Well, TikTok has leapt into life. J.D. Vance is transformed into a rather fetching lady, albeit with a beard. Well, notwithstanding today's court ruling, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but it is worth seeing. And the Chinese people are appearing everywhere throughout China, in the Shenzhen factories in particular, and showing us just how we've been ripped off by luxury brands over these last decades, since the American capitalism moved the American workers' lunch down to China in the hope of making extra profits there. And my God, did they make extra profits. I'm looking at handbags that retail at $38,000. I know, crazed. Who would pay $38,000 for a handbag? Well, the answer is a surprisingly large number of idiots. And they had no idea just quite how idiotic they had been, because China is now revealing the actual cost of these garments and these accessories that leave the Chinese factory, worth several $100s before arriving on your high street or arriving on your dressing room table at many hundreds of times that value. China is revealing that all that is valued, all that is wanted, desired, maybe even now and again needed by people in the West comes from China. There are still some fools who think that China sends only plastic toys. As a household that never buys plastic toys, wherever they're made, we wouldn't know how many plastic toys they actually make. But from iPhones to computers to iPads to the refining of rare earth materials to the high fashion and medium fashion and even low fashion that passes muster in the West today as a must-have, it all comes from China. So China has all the cards. There are other fools who think that the United States is China's biggest customer. It is not even remotely China's biggest customer. It accounts for 3% of China's total GDP if America bought nothing at all from China. And of course they have to, which is why they've rolled back some of the tariffs, because they simply have to buy many Chinese products. But all of Latin America has China as its largest trading partner. Much of Europe does too. The ASEAN countries do. The African countries do. The world truly is China's economic oyster. And ours, it isn't. The Americans, it isn't. And it sure as hell ain't the British. So where's this all going to end? Is it a precursor to a shooting war? Is it paving the way to a trade war that leads to an actual war? Or is it just the art of the deal? Though, as Donald Trump himself wrote in The Art of the Deal, the very worst way to make a deal is to show that you are desperate to make it. But that's exactly what the United States currently looks like. 3 times now they have begged China to call them, but China will never call them. That's just not the Chinese way. So Donald Trump's beginning to make an awful lot of mistakes. In fact, it's hard to imagine a president who has made so many mistakes in such a short period of time as the second term of Donald J. Trump. And it's not just in relation to China. It's far more bloodily the case that the current massacres in Gaza are directly the responsibility of Donald Trump. It's Netanyahu that's pulling the trigger, but the trigger was given to him by Donald Trump, and the green light to pull it was given to him by Donald Trump. And the declaration that the United States is going to become the occupying power in the Gaza Strip, but only once a gigantic international crime of mass, total, forced dispersal of the population, ethnic cleansing with a tin hat on it. That's a very big mistake. It's a very big mistake to be in talks with Iran while insulting them hourly, whilst threatening them half-hourly. Who told Donald Trump that that is the way to make a deal? It might be in Minnesota, I wouldn't know, but I know it isn't the way to make a deal with China or with Iran or with the people of the Yemen. They're not like us, Donald. They don't deal in the currency of threats and insults. And if you really want a deal, if you want to avoid a war, you better change your tune, or that's what you're going to get. And if you didn't actually want that, that will constitute a very serious mistake indeed. I've only time to deal with the other very big issue that is in front of us today, and it constitutes another mistake. Donald Trump could have said, should have said, and in the beginning appeared to say, Ukraine was Joe Biden's war. We should never have got involved in it. We've wasted far too much treasure, and far too much blood spilled has been the result. Therefore, on taking office, there will be no more American weapons. There will be no more intelligence flowing from American satellites to little Zelensky and his anti-democratic regime in Kiev, and there will be no more money. And actually, to be fair, he has said those things, but only in order to quickly reverse them. So, right at this moment, Donald Trump is viscerally insulting Zelensky whilst sending him more and more war material, whilst sending him more and more American public money, and whilst, crucially, beaming to him more and more American intelligence. It's not the way to end the war, Donald. Your peace prize has already disappeared out the window. Let's make sure that your second term isn't entirely drowned in blood. My first guest this evening is a man who knows all about war and all about American governance and all about Donald Trump. He's Colonel Douglas Macgregor, so you better hold on until he comes up after this short break. Stay tuned.